Rings of Power, Season 1, Episode 1. One of, I would say, the more anticipated television shows to come out in a while for a number of reasons. I am Court. This is Tim. We're back here, the Friends We Made podcast, to talk about a different show now. We've been talking about House of the Dragons a little bit. So this is a new fantasy show out. Everyone knows about Lord of the Rings, doesn't need any introduction. Um, what was your first overall impression?
I mean, I think the money that they put into it, which was apparently vast, was obvious in production value. I think everything looked great. I think everything sounded great. I think it looked like a big blockbuster movie you'd see in the theater, which is, even other large Amazon shows recently and other really big titles from other networks. Nothing's looked like it cost so much money.
No, I 100% agree. And, just if you're watching for some background, like I said, we talk about Game of Thrones a lot. We both read the Song of Ice and Fire series, the books that are out. I think we read the entire series even before the show came out, with the exception of Dance with Dragons that came out right when season 1 came out. However, Lord of the Rings, I'm just a movie person, did not read the books, didn't read The Hobbit, so I don't know as much about the source material. And I think, Tim, you're on the same wavelength there.
Yeah, same wavelength. And also, just to note, when it comes to overall thoughts on this show, is I'm a huge Wheel of Time fan who's read all the books multiple times, and Amazon recently released that show, and some of the
Which
money
we
that
will
should
talk
have,
about.
yes, exactly, some of the money that could have and should have gone to the Wheel of Time definitely. I think the Wheel of Time would have been a better series financially, if not necessarily a better series, had it not been for them taking on both of these tasks simultaneously. So I'm a little bitter to start off with. I understand why they did it, and I hold no grudges. But at the same time, that's a lot of money to make to distribute to one series while you're simultaneously trying to make another huge budget fantasy series that could have, I believe, been just as big, if not bigger. Because again, all these people, same with the Game of Thrones, same with Rings of Power, people are trying to piggyback off of previous successes. When I truly believe that if half the budget that was given to the Game of Thrones, or I'm sorry, the Rings of Power, was added to what Wheel of Time already had, we might have had the next Game of Thrones or the next Lord of the Rings instead of just a piggyback off of what we've already seen and we've already lived and rehashed. So again,
Interesting. That's
if I'm bitter, I'm sorry, but I do believe that I'm ready for something new, whether it's Wheel of Time or not. I would like to see some piggybacking and some new projects, be allowed to take the spotlight.
no, that is really interesting. And I mean, you may be bitter, but you're not nearly as bitter as a lot of the people who watched the first episode for various reasons that we will get into. So, as you alluded to, I believe this is the most expensive show in the history of television,
Per
coming in at
episode
over
it is.
$500 million to produce it. As a caveat, though, I will add that I believe a lot of that, possibly half of it, went to obtaining the licensing rights from the copyright owners. So not even going into the production of the show, just getting their permission to be able to make it. And there are some licensing issues. There's some bits of source material that they could not get their hands on, even with Amazon money behind them, so that those parts won't be incorporated into the show.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
And as part of that, I think they had to agree to make at least 5 seasons of the show. And they gave it to Amazon because they know Amazon's in a financial situation as a studio where they can pour the money into the show. Because I think the worst thing you could have with a high fantasy adaptation onto the screen, be it film or TV, is for it to look cheap. If you put some high fantasy out there and it looks cheap, and no one's going to take it seriously, no matter how good the actual material is based off of is.
Yeah.
And I will say, I've talked to a few people about it, and I asked you your first thoughts, and your first thing you said was you went to the production value and how good it looked. I will agree. I watched it on like my 86-inch TV, dark room, subwoofer. It looked as good as anything else I've ever watched on that TV. It might have been the best looking thing, but when everyone who talks about your show talks about how the production value of it first, I don't think that's a great sign for the quality of everything else. When it's like, all right, what's your first impression? Well, they spent a lot of money on it.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Unfortunately,
No.
I don't have a lot of compliments past that, so, but again, I'm not a big, just in general, Middle Earth fan. I know there's been lots of like The Hobbit. I read The Hobbit. That's the one thing I've done. I've read The Hobbit. I'm pretty sure I've seen all the movies, but it's been years. But
there
past
was
that,
only two of those.
I wasn't a big fan of most of what happened on that episode. I mean,
The Hobbit movie wasn't very good. So also,
they took a 100-page book, maybe 100. I don't even know, but I have it somewhere. But they took like a short book and they turned it into 3 epic movies. Like they just talk about milking.
It's a cash grab. It's a cash.
I don't know if I've seen so much milking out of one single book. Then I mean that was
so. I don't know if you know this, but they had to shut down the ranking system because they were getting review bombed.
I heard that they shut off for like 48 hours or 24 hours or something.
And I knew that was coming because people have been complaining for the last 5 or 6 months about the casting. It's being too diverse. It isn't true to the source material. And,
Are you referring to like the Black Elves?
Yeah.
I thought that was weird. Just like I'd never seen that before from, any source material, but I don't know it well. So, but it seems weird because if you got this race that is like basically eternal, it seems weird that they would have such diversity amongst themselves, Eventually they would kind of become one look, I would think, but it doesn't bother me. It's just, I figured that's when you said that, that's the first thing I thought of.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's interesting. To me, I don't really care about the race of the actors that play any of the characters unless the race of them is essential to that character trait. Right. Like I've heard people say things like, "Oh, well, if they did a remake of Malcolm X and they cast a white actor," and it's like, "Well, Malcolm X is actually a real person that existed in the real world, not a fantasy story." Yeah. And
to compare that's ridiculous.
His race is integral to actually his whole story, so that would be a little weird. That would take me out of it. In a situation like this, if you don't take me out of it, I don't really care that much. And I think the studios I will say this, they will hide behind that to shield themselves from criticism. We're planning on talking about Andor when it comes out. And I know when the last Star Wars project came out on Disney, the Obi-Wan Kenobi, there was the black actress that had a leading role as the villain. I think it was the third sister. If I'm not mistaken, I forgot the name that she had.
Yeah, I think it was third sister. I can't remember either. And I didn't think she was great, but had nothing to do with it.
I didn't like her character from the beginning.
Yeah, me neither.
And I didn't even know that there was that backlash yet. That like, oh, do I think that some racist people sent her some messages? Yeah, I live in the world in 2022. That does not sound nearly outside of the realm of possibility. It's something that I could not believe happened. I certainly believe that happened. But I also think her character was poorly written, poorly directed, poorly executed, and I understood why it got criticism. So
yeah, I agree with this.
I went into this
hide behind it. It's like, just again, I could bring out the wheel of time again if I wanted to, but we won't do that right now. But either way, I do think, I don't know. It's tough to, because people are going to send that hateful stuff. It's tough to like actually criticize sometimes, But as far as that goes, if the race of that elf, he was probably my favorite character in the entire episode.
I thought so too. Actually,
if that is what they're talking about, then I would have to disagree because he's probably the only person whose story I was actually like caring about by the end of the episode. So,
so getting into the actual episode, I did not really care for episode 1, and my problem is, and I alluded to this when we were talking about House of the Dragon. I don't like the storytelling device of having someone give an exposition dump to start off a story. And I think maybe they did it that way partially because that's how the Fellowship of the Ring started, with the same character, Galadriel, giving us an exposition of this world and what's been going on for the past 3,000 years. One, I thought that story was told better in Fellowship of the Rings. It was shorter and it was a more simpler story. Here, this whole first 10 minutes of the episode, I hated it. When she was talking to her brother, I think his name was Fendron, in the first scene where she's like very young. I think she was like under 100 years old when she was like a child because she's an elf, so they live forever. that wasn't a real conversation that he had with her. That was, let me tell you something that sounds mystical for this one scene.
It
And
didn't
it's
even. I didn't like that at all.
like why do we care? You haven't even introduced what his name is to her. And then he ends it off by saying, I won't always be here, which is the weirdest thing for someone who lives in the undying land to say for some reason. They didn't even have a word for death. That's literally the next thing she says. And we did not have a word for death at that point. It's like, so why did he tell you that he wouldn't always be there? It makes no
Probably
sense.
because he doesn't know how boats float.
Was that?
If he ever expected to get on a boat, it's probably because he didn't understand why boats float. He thinks it has something to do with like their like light and darkness and looking down versus up. I mean,
it's funny that you say that because he said it. I was like, that doesn't even make sense. What he said, it's not deep. It's dumb.
Like I legitimately thought he was going to explain the physics of why boats float. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Let's see where, but yeah, no. I don't.
Yeah, that was not a real conversation. Like, slow it down, introduce us to these characters. Let's have them talking about regular mundane things so we see who they are before it's like, oh, let's just have him say like one really deep sentence that's she's gonna carry with her for the rest of her life. And then let's have her literally spend the next 10 minutes explaining thousands of years of history.
Like, it's just cheap and like, I don't know. I don't think that like the people who are like front running these shows, the people who are like making the decisions realize that people want the connection because they care, not because they just heard a good story for 5 seconds. It's like, I don't know. Again, they've taken all this emotion, just same exact thing that's going on with, Game of Thrones. They take all this hype and all these people who love this, series for what it was, and they just try to piggyback off it so quick that, I mean, I don't know. It's just.
But Game of Thrones is doing so much better at like getting you to care about the characters in the beginning. Because it didn't show her she's like a leader. She's leading this company. And, I hated those scenes. I hated the scenes where like walking through the snow
leader.
And the wind is like pushing them back. Because the second she turns around to talk to them, it's like they're not being affected by that wind anymore.
Yeah,
like the physics of that scene make no sense to me. Like, you guys are literally leaning forward just to walk because of how hard the wind is blowing. But let me just like stop, turn around, and come back and talk to you. Like, this person fell behind. We can't stop for him. But actually, I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna walk over here and talk to you.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have any gear with them. They're like, we should camp here. And I'm like, what do you mean camp? You guys don't have any pack horses. Like, I don't see. There's no tents. Like, you can't build a fire. Like, what does camping mean in this world here? It doesn't feel lived in at all to me.
No, not at all. I mean, everything's very, you see what you get. Like, it's like right there. Everything's surface level. But yeah, right. I mean, that's kind of what I talk about everything. I mean, that's even the little people. I mean, I guess we'll get to that. But yeah, no, that first scene with them, I mean, she was a terrible leader. Like, she's, like you said, I mean, they're supposed to be these ancient races, but like, I mean, she dwells on something that happened for a total of 10 minutes. Be it something somebody told to her once, or I don't know. It's just, and she picked up her brother's, baton and started running with that for seemingly not much reason. Like, I don't know. It's all very unexplained and therefore hard to get behind and hard to care about.
Right, and so it's funny because like one of the people who was complaining about the show and the characters or whatever was Elon Musk, and he said something online about how all the male characters are like not likable, and the female characters are just like these like great individuals. It's like, I don't see that at all.
No,
I don't see that at all. We meet Indron later. I thought he was fine. We're saying the darker elf that we meet, I thought he was good. And then the main female that we're leading is obviously a very flawed individual. So it's like, did you even watch the show? I don't know.
I think by that he meant like main character, I guess. Because, I mean, that's it. They had the more screen time, but they didn't have any more likability. I mean, it's right. Yeah, so what was next scene after the...
So then we actually get into the show after we get, like, this 10-minute exposition dump. And we meet these, I guess they're like proto hobbits. The hobbits don't exist yet, but these are, like, the forerunners to the hobbits.
See, I didn't even realize that. I thought they were, like, a completely separate race, but I got that their feet were big, which is a hobbit thing. And
yeah, I mean, I guess they are a separate race. I don't think that they're supposed to be like the hobbits' ancestors or anything, but they're clearly there to give like the people who watch the movies and that's all they know like this into the world. Like, hey, you remember Frodo, right? Well, here's our version of Frodo. It's this young girl. She's gonna be fun. And I didn't have a problem with them really, but I would also say that like we need to. I feel like you start a series with a character and you watch that character, and then the series grows out from there. You know, let's start off with Ned Stark, introduce his family, and then we'll introduce the people that they interact with, and then eventually you have this huge ensemble, and it's easier to care about people because of the time you spend with the people.
You could say that with Frodo. Let's introduce Frodo. He runs into Gandalf. Gandalf meets other wizards. Frodo moves on and meets other hobbits. They all go on and meet, the king or whatever. Like, I mean, that's just storytelling 101. Like, you don't.
And you see,
that's why I was saying they're skipping things. They're piggybacking off what was popular because of the fact that what was popular had a beginning too.
Right?
That's what they're forgetting is that like those stories had a beginning that followed the regular arc, and that's important. There's a reason there's like 2 to 3 different arcs that you take in a story. It's because to get us to believe and buy in, you have to have certain things happen. You can't just spread out throughout the world. And either way, maybe they're going to do it with all of them.
And one of the things that Lord of the Rings is known for is being the classic heroes arc. The classic young person from small area, hasn't never seen the world, and gets pulled into this huge adventure that they weren't ready for, and we see them struggle and grow on it. And it's such a great storytelling device. And because I knew we were going to talk about this at the beginning, when she says they're in the Undying Land, it's before anyone's ever known war. I was like, okay, here we are, classic hero's journey, starting off. I actually thought that we're starting off with this person who's going to get pulled into something. And it's like, no, you don't say it at all. 10 minutes later, It's 1,000 years later. She's an adult. She's like a warrior. And it's like, how did any of that happen? I have no investment in anything that you do. I don't know. You guys are obviously great warriors, but I've never seen you train. So when you're having a fight, there's no stakes to it because I just assume you're going to be better and stronger than whoever you're fighting and kill them. Like, I haven't seen you struggle to get to where you are. There's
got to be some character that eventually takes that, though. Like, but who's that going to be? And if not, then I'd have no interest in the show at all. You know what I mean? Right. Like, are they just going to skip that because it's such an epic fantasy? Again, they're missing the point. And I honestly think that they're missing the point because it seems like right now that's just a trend. People piggybacking off of old stories and.
Well, I think the problem is you have too many producers and people in charge. You don't have the one person who's trying to tell their story. Everything's going to be focus group and tested, and it's going to end up watering everything down because when you spend $700 million on a project and you're the richest man in the world and you're known for getting return on your investments, you're trying to make sure that you get wide appeal and not necessarily put out the best quality product, because by quality, they just see their production value. They don't actually see, are the people who like this story going to like what we put out?
Yeah, I mean, you just like hurt my feelings on so many counts. Like things like just like I don't know, I'm watching like movies with like my kids. I'm watching like the original Ninja Turtles and like Three Ninjas and Last Action Hero and movies that just couldn't happen anymore because it would only appeal to 20% of the audience. But again, this is something that Tim Ferriss. I don't know if you know Tim Ferriss, but he wrote the 4-Hour Work Week and stuff. Like his whole business model since has always been find a smaller group and just wow the fuck out of them. And that's going to make you all the money you could ever want. That's going to make you all the success you could ever need. And that's what movies are missing now. Do you think every little kid loved Ninja Turtles? No, but 20% of us loved it. We still talk about it. And we're almost in our 40s.
I brought it up today at work, actually. It's odd that you mentioned that.
Lord of the Rings when it came out. Probably less than 5% of people. And now it's one of the biggest things on the planet. But they got to please 60 to 75% of people every time they release a show, which means they're never going to have that love. They're never going to have that following. It's just, right. I don't know, it feels.
I literally brought up Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at work today. It's so crazy that you even mentioned that. This girl was like, oh, yeah, I saw that. It came out like 7 years ago. Oh. And I was like, no, the one that came out in 1989. And she was like, I wasn't even born yet. And I was like, there were a lot of great movies that came out before you were born. If that's your cutoff, you're going to miss out on all the great cinema. you're living your life thinking that Avatar is the greatest movie ever.
Oh my god. Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, as far as the rest of the episode goes, I feel like we did introduce some people. And I liked the elf Arendelle, I think his name was. I thought that was a cool story that they've been there for like 70 years, kind of like an occupation of those people, basically. Like the humans.
It is.
Yeah, like you guys.
That's one of the things I liked. They actually hinted for once. They hinted that those people. Well, not they hinted. They actually said it, but it still felt like a hint after all the slapping in the face we got.
Right.
You know, walking us through the rest of the story, but where like those were like the bad humans, and now they're watching them to make sure they become better humans, and they actually are becoming better humans. It seems like, but
and they're growing attached to them because they've been there for so long. Not a long time in their eyes, but still.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, that was one of the better story arcs. I didn't really love the little people. I mean, it was okay. I can see where it's going. I mean, I liked it, but yeah, one of the things.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, what was the next scene?
I was gonna say the scene of the elves sailing back into the Undying Land.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna talk about. Yeah.
On the boat. Like, I'm
hoping you're saying the same thing I think. Right.
What are the physics of that boat? They're all just standing there holding their swords. Like,
yeah, no, if they've never seen a sailboat, that's like exactly what I was saying. Like, they're all just standing there, and the boat's just like.
That's what I mean by the world's not lived in. Like, how does this boat move across the water?
Yeah.
Like, why doesn't it just sink or anything? Like, I don't see a sail. I don't see a rope or a oar.
I mean, and it takes like effort. You gotta like steer and like, I don't know, man the this and like tend to the that. I've heard sailors talk before in movies. These things they're doing. They're always moving around barefoot.
If you're on a boat, you're there to sail the boat. You need a crew to do it.
Yeah, no, they're just chilling.
Like, you need someone in charge showing everybody else to do their jobs.
I mean, I assume magic. But still, like it didn't feel lived in. Yeah, they just literally just like coasted across. Like again, that's how boats float.
And
they looked up. It's just like 100% magic. There's like no like, I don't know. Right. And I think good fantasy is moving in the other direction. Like I like the Lord of the Rings, like for what it is. The Wheel of Time moved in a more realistic direction, even though not at all. But then like Malazan, Book of the Fallen is another series I read. Feels like you're living. If they were on a boat, you would know exactly what everybody was doing. And, I feel like that's the direction I like fantasy moving. They just took us back like 50 years, which is when the series was written. So it makes sense. But people aren't about that. We can't be the only people that notice them all just standing there on this boat. You know what I mean? Like, it's not entertainment. I want to see like people sailing a boat, and like hardships and struggles. I don't want to see them just standing there and coasting to exactly where they need to be. And I don't know, it doesn't feel natural and entertaining.
One of the famous quotes about George R.R. Martin, he really liked Lord of the Rings. Obviously, you would imagine someone of his age, and the fact that he's an author. I mean, he wasn't always a fantasy author. He's written a lot of genres, but he is a fan of the fantasy genre. So he was a big fan of Lord of the Rings and the source material. But his criticism of it is, and why he decided to write the story the way he wrote it, is that Lord of the Rings is good guys wearing white that are handsome fighting against ugly guys wearing black that are evil. And like, that's just what it is. It's a story of good and evil. It doesn't mean that it's not entertaining, but that's not the way things are in the real world.
No.
In the real world, rarely is it just good versus evil. A lot of times it is people from their perspective living life, and everyone thinks they're on the right side.
Yeah. And have you listened to any of the recordings of Robert Jordan at the end of the audiobooks?
Yeah, I feel like I've heard the same
recording. I think at the end of every one of them.
I feel like I've heard the same one a couple of times, but I have heard some of them. Yes.
I mean, I maybe there's multiple ones. I've only listened to it like once or twice, but it was the same one. But at the end of any of the audiobooks you listen to, it has, it's like a brief, talk with Robert Jordan, and it's like, what got you to do this? And he's like, I'm from the middle of nowhere. He's like, I don't think that if the wise old wizard showed up, they'd be like, oh, let's go off and do it. They'd be like, you know what? Let's have a beer or two. I'm going to go sneak out the back door. And, and again, just realistic, adding like human factors and realistic and what people would actually do in situations. And the Lord of the Rings has none of that, which again, I appreciate that it was the first of its kind. So, I mean, I'm not knocking it at all, but we're not there anymore. We've moved on from that as like a fantasy culture. And we're to the point where we want to see the why. We want to see the struggle. We want to see the dirt. We don't want to just see people floating across a perfect ocean to Never Never Land, and
Right.
because it doesn't make sense and it's not entertaining. It's entertaining to see the struggle, and so either way, I mean, I don't know. And then I have a feeling they're going to go more in that direction, just because we can't be the only ones thinking that way. And I just think that as a first episode, it's a little early to judge.
Yeah,
that was
I think we're
definitely
going
my
to get
biggest
more
problem.
smaller stories and more character as we get into it. There was a lot of backstory stuff they wanted to get out of the way, and I think a better way to do that would just be conversations that characters have about the world. Like going back to the very beginning of the episode when we're seeing them on this journey that they've been on for centuries, where basically everyone else thinks that the evil is gone, and I do like that theme that everyone is starting to get complacent. That Sauron, that's over with. That was years ago, centuries ago. We've forgotten about that. And you have to be vigilant. You can't just assume that the evil is gone. That is a strong theme. So I don't want to get that lost that, I don't like anything about the show. But the points where the male companion she has is arguing with her that the people are not going to follow her because they've been going at this for too long. They lost faith in her. Rather than having him just walk up to her and say that, we need scenes of these people talking to each other, talking amongst each other, seeing the struggles that they're going to, seeing how they get to that situation. Because when he just walks up to her and says it, it's like, so am I to believe this is the first time this has come up?
Yeah, right.
We've been doing this for centuries now. And this is like, oh, he's just, we've been talking and we want to let you know we don't agree with this. That's not how any of that would work.
I mean, that's the problem with the fact that the time spans so great a time, but we're only seeing, I mean, not even a minuscule time. We're seeing instants,
Right.
Is that everything's got to be so blunt. And there's really not a whole lot of way around that except for to stretch it out, which, again, I don't know if that was the right answer or, again, I'm just hoping.
That's what I would have done if I
that they're just getting it out of the way, because I'll forgive them if they get it out of the way and things work out okay. But if we get another couple episodes like that, it's just going to be, I mean, it's just not sustainable.
Best case scenario, we're not even thinking about it in season 3. We've gotten enmeshed in the world, and it's just this is something we look forward to watching every week. But we'll see how it goes. We got to come back and talk about season 2 soon, and put that up as well. But if you watched to the end, thanks for tuning in to this one.
Last thing was Superman falling from the sky.
Oh yeah, Meteor Man. I didn't even think about that. Meteor Man falling from the sky. So that
I don't know. I mean, that's definitely rang of all the hero stories we're getting these days. I have no idea, like Lord of the Rings style. I have no idea what that could be. It doesn't fit really with anything else I know of.
He's from a planet with a red sun. Maybe that'd be good for them.
That's what I'm thinking, and that would be entertaining. Maybe it's Homelander.
Homelander. That would not be good for anyone.
Or Mr.
Omni-Man.
Omni-Man, there you go. Yeah, no, maybe it's...
Yeah, I think Omni-Man would deal with Sauron in about an afternoon, or maybe I'm disrespecting Sauron. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, but Omni-Man, he looks pretty. I don't want to mess with the Viltrumites.
Well, but I'm hoping it's something like that where it just throws a wrench in everybody's plans, and maybe he's the main character. We never know. But yeah, so that was intriguing. I like that at the end. Although I will say, for the size of the comet or whatever the fuck he was on, that rode across the sky, and for how fast and how large it was, I mean, he created a hole the size of my bathroom.
You think he'd be a bigger crater?
I definitely expected a giant, and I mean, it was like a little hobbit that was looking at the hole, so it wasn't even a weird perspective. I mean, it was just a small ass hole. He landed on the ground, and it was maybe 6 feet deep. But either way, it was still intriguing and looking forward. I'm looking forward to the next episode.
Missed the Meteor Man part. That's exciting. Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna see what Galadriel is gonna do. She did not go to the Undying Land. She abandoned the ship that sells itself. And we heard what her brother said to her. You gotta touch the darkness to know. I don't know what any of it means. It sounds like a bunch of nonsense that was just written to sound like it means something when it doesn't. But hopefully, I'll be proven wrong.
And that the map they showed, because they showed a pretty decent map multiple times. It's a fat ocean. She's
I noticed that too.
For months.
I noticed that too. I literally thought, that ocean's that thing's a big deal.
It was no joke. That was literally more Pacific than Atlantic. She's going to be beefy by the time that swim is done.
It's funny. I did notice that.
Yeah.
But all right. So I think that'll wrap it up for us. Like, comment, subscribe, tune in for more videos. I'm excited. I'm really excited for Andor. The trailers on that look good. So we'll be talking about that soon.
3 days?
Oh, no. I think it's another couple weeks.
Oh, I thought it was the 9th.
I'll double check. We'll double check. We'll figure it out.
All
Thanks for tuning
Till
in.
next time.
And we will see you friends next time.
Sir.